Welcome to Unorthodox Perspectives with your host, Luke Burrows.
I think like your mission, your vision, your purpose, your passion, it's all interlinked.
And Leeroy Mabonga.
Discipline is the first step to control.
All right, guys, welcome to episode 13 of Unorthodox Perspectives. Leeroy is running a bit late, so as soon as he's here, I'm going to bring Leeroy on. Today, guys, we're going to be joined by Matt Wilson, and I'm going to bring him on in just a second. So if you caught mine and Leeroy's Instagram live yesterday, you would have heard that we're really excited to bring Unorthodox Perspectives back. It's been a little while since we've done this podcast, this show, this talk show. And so, yeah, guys, like we're back episode 13. Okay. So we're really looking forward to it. With that all said and done, let's bring Matt on and get Matt to introduce himself. Hi, Matt. How are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm really good. Thank you. Really looking forward to today. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
No, not a problem at all. I've been really looking forward to it. Really excited. It's been a while since we've caught up.
It has. It definitely has. So while we're waiting for Leeroy to join us, if you go ahead and kind of introduce yourself, like who is Matt Wilson, what do you do, and then yeah, we're kind of we're kind of have a little conversation before Leeroy joins us here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm Matt Wilson. Obviously, it says at the bottom of the screen there, but I'm a personal trainer by trade, and I have been for the last 5 years. But I'm also a coach. So I help a lot of people realize their inner strengths, essentially. I band myself about, for want of other words, as a superhero finder. So it's taking the normal people, making them see their own strengths and their abilities and helping them apply that to life to get where they want to be. It's really empowering.
Amazing. And how long have you been doing that?
For the last year. So lockdown really was a massive change for me. So it rather than going the traditional route of just personal training, I thought, well, I'll branch out into having a healthy mind and body. So it was a good opportunity to do so when the brakes got put on by the first lockdown, where you fight or flight, don't you? So I thought, how can I apply myself in a different way? And this is where I am.
Amazing, man. Amazing. So before that, you were doing the personal training?
Yeah, personal training in the gym. Started off at Virgin Active for the first 6 months, and then I was completely self-employed. So I've been self-employed with my own business for about 4.5 years now. I've never turned back.
No. What's the main things you've got? I'm sure there's loads of things you've learned. I'm just curious, like obviously running your own business, what are the things that come to mind when I say what are the top 3 things you've learned on this crazy journey of entrepreneurship?
Oh man, that it's really nice having a boss. I think the first one, because when you are your own boss, there are some times where you just need the accountability. So actually on that, it's been a learning point for me to surround myself with people who have either been through the same, who are able to pull themselves away from your dilemma and look at things objectively. In my job, I look at things objectively anyway, but it's really difficult to do it for yourself. It's the old saying of the mechanic never fixes his own car, or the tradesman, his house is never fixed and stuff. So it's important to have the good people around you to keep you going, to keep you motivated. 'Cause it's not always easy, but it's just having the freedom to be able to make your own choices, and actually, I suppose, be the creator. This is going to sound really grand, but be the creator of your own, not necessarily destiny, but your own fortune. Your own whatever success is to you, you create it, and without you, it doesn't come. So,
yeah,
it's liberating.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like when you're your own boss, you're in charge of the driving seat, right? Like we're all in charge of the driving seat, like within our own lives, anyway. But then when you're you choose like this path, then especially within business, like everything falls on your shoulders ultimately, And so, but like for me, I actually kind of enjoy it, like I chose, like I can't complain because I chose this path, like, so yeah, it's just part of it, and so we just got to take the rough with the smooth, I guess.
Yeah, well, and that's it. You very, very quickly get used to that feeling of not so well. It is feeling of failure at the start. I think when the first couple of things don't work, and then things that do work might not always work. So it's very, very quickly you get told, and if you're going to survive as a business, as an entrepreneur, you've got to be able to adapt. You've got to be able to look at things latitude as well as the normal places, and think sideways, think upwards, downwards, in, out, shake it all about.
Yeah.
You got to be able to think of different directions to be able to apply what it is actually you want to get from your business. What is your purpose? So
yeah, definitely. Awesome. So guys, if you're just joining us, we're just waiting for Leeroy to come on. You think he's running a bit late. One of those days, I think we've all had them, right? So we're joined by Matt Wilson today. We're going to be having an awesome conversation with him. And so yeah, we're just going to wait for Leeroy to join us. If people have any comments or questions they want to put to us, anything that's kind of going on in your life right now you want to share, then we've got the comment section up here. So feel free to leave a comment there. Yeah, and we'll just wait for Leeroy to join us. Matt, I am interested in like your brand, because it's a really awesome brand. I see you wearing the cap as well. I still got to get a cap for my brand as well. Like, talk me through the and your top as well. Talk me through I mean, you briefly spoke about it. Talk me through the idea behind it. Like, where did the inspiration come from?
So I actually started a couple of years ago. Good question, by the way, because it stands for I'm doing it for me. And one of the biggest things that I have found is that we live very much in a world where we do things for other people. And that's amazing. That's so powerful, and it's amazing to see in the world. However, there has got to be a point where you do things for yourself to enable yourself to be able to do things for other people. So it's about working on you to be the best version of you can be, to then help other people. So I rebranded just during lockdown to this. This is the second logo I've used, and I just love the shape of it because of the Superman-esque, superhero logo. Trying to keep it simple, but it really is about building that community of people who realize, whether it's fitness or whether it is investing in someone like a coach or getting that support or whatever they're doing it for them, spending time on themselves. In busy lives, could be parents, could be dependents or carers or whoever you are, spending time on yourself to be the best version of you for the world, because at the end of the day, the world deserves it. And all the time you spend with other people and helping other people, you're going to be much more effective if you've spent the groundwork, if you've done the things that make you happy, and that bring that true self. So that's where it came from. And it's kind of just grown from there, really, to, like you say, clothing, t-shirts and all. So exciting.
Amazing. Leeroy, you're here. How are you?
How's it going, guys? Sorry I'm late.
No problem. Leeroy, meet Matt. Matt, meet Leeroy. Leeroy, Matt was just kind of talking us through his brands and everything. Good,
man. How you doing? Nice to meet you. Yeah, nice to meet you finally. I think the network is a bit
definitely
slow.
There's a little bit of a delay, isn't there?
Yeah.
It's all good, guys. Awesome. Cool. So we're really start to dive into the conversation. Leeroy, just for a bit of context on what we were talking about. So Matt will just kind of introduce himself. He's a life coach, does coaching, personal trainer as well. That's kind of like his background. We're just talking about his brand. I don't know if you can see his cap and his top, but that's his brand. Doing it for me. So he was just kind of talking about the brand. Like I was asking him the inspiration behind it. That's pretty much where we got to. So Matt does coaching and a personal trainer.
That's pretty cool, man. Nah, that's cool. I won't stop you. You can finish off what as I found you were still talking about your brand, weren't you? Oof. Can you hear me, Matt?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
You're talking to me,
Yeah.
Leeroy.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you. I think it's a bit better now, the network.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
It's a little bit better. Yeah.
Awesome. So no, I think we kind of, Matt just kind of finished what he was sharing about his brand, which is really awesome. So I mean, one of the things we wanted to talk about today was, and obviously with this being unorthodox perspectives and everything, was, and Matt, you kind of mentioned it, was that sometimes needing to be selfish per se, in order to be selfless. And so that's, I think, is very much something that could be seen as like unconventional, because a lot of kind of, especially like in our space, it's all about kind of giving to others, serving others. And it's definitely like, there's obviously something in that, like for me, even if I give like a present to someone, like there's so much more happiness I get than when I receive something, right? So like from that kind of small thing to whatever it is. But I definitely agree that we can ultimately serve from like an empty cup, and that we have to be able to like get ourselves to that emotional, physical, mental place where then we're able to give to others, if that makes sense. So then the cup's like, I don't know, the cup's overflowing, so then we can give to others. So let's kind of go there and talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the interesting thing is on the word selfish. Because I don't know about you guys, but I was always brought up to not be selfish, to share. And that was the opposite. So the good thing was to share, and it was to give. And I think there's a distinction between the definition of selfish, which is do something for purely your own gain, and actually not doing things for others. So selfish for me is actually doing things always for yourself and never thinking of others. So it's that thought process. Whereas actually being selfish a little could just be saying no, so having a boundary on something because you had maybe planned that time to do something to set yourself up for the next day or something you enjoy. So if you're always saying yes and you're always helping other people, you haven't got time to recharge, you haven't got that time to get your thoughts together, and actually you haven't got the time to do your work and what you want to give the justice. So you're actually saying yes to being inefficient and possibly making yourself ill. I've seen people make themselves ill by helping all the time. We see professions all the time, NHS, vets, all these people that are helping, and that's what they do. They serve all day and all night. And actually, it gets to a point where if you don't have things like the time off, and all these little things that you need to do to underpin what you do, then it can really weigh you down.
Leeroy?
Yeah, for me, it's about the word selfish. It's about how you define it, really.
Yeah, I think I'm in line with what Matt is saying, to be honest. I think there is a fine balance between, I think we can sort of, the connotations with selfish, it's like what Matt is saying, like, I think when we are trying to take care of ourselves, and put that across to people when they ask for something from us or anything like that, you can come across as selfish because anything to do with self is classed as selfish, whereas there is also that self-care that it can come across as if somebody's being selfish, but not really. You're caring for yourself. So in you having a limited amount of expression or giving, people, when you do not give them more than they want, what do they then say? Oh, you're being selfish. And like Matt is saying, so for many of us, we may be of a background of we may be empathetic, you may be very helpful, you may want to help others, and that line can then be so blurred that you do not even see the difference. But like what Matt is saying, I think that's true. Like there is a fine line that there's a thought process of doing everything and anything for your own self gain, and then there's giving yourself for others, but then knowing there's a limit for also caring for self. and I think having that definition would go a long way. I think as well, like society as well, like has pinned us to, there's this subtle selfishness that we cannot express outward, and of which, if anybody ever sort of expresses that, you're classed as selfish. But in order for you to do anything in this life, like, you need to have that balance, like what Matt is saying, like there has to be an underpinning rest period, anything to help you maintain yourself. And when we all look at the word with the connotation of it being a bad word, we rarely look at that sort of like taking some time for yourself as anything good, but it's always bad because you're thinking, oh, I'm doing it for myself, so that must be selfish. I need to give more of my time. Even the little I have, I need to give more so that I seem like I'm also helpful. But there's that balance. So yeah, I agree with Mark there. Like there needs to be a clear line between that selfish for self gain, and then these self care for self maintenance, I think.
Matt,
I think there's also a why you. Oh yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's your motivation behind doing something as well. So it's all right. Somebody asking me for help. Okay, now presuming that I'm just a average Joe, there's nothing about me. I'm not me. I'm not the me I am today. But in this situation, so if somebody asks me for help, and I say, no, I can't, I'm doing this, or and my thought is, I can't be bothered. There's a difference between doing that and, like you say, a difference between somebody asking for help and you trying in another way to help, but you can't because there's a reason, and you're trying to look after yourself and having that boundary. So I think it depends on the type of person as well as to where that definition of selfish is, and also whether it's in someone's character. Sometimes I think that selfishness can be avoided by just asking the right person when you want something. If somebody tends to be that way, you wouldn't necessarily have the expectation to go to that person to ask them for something if the likelihood is they're going to say no, or they're not going to be very helpful. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. I use the word selfish whenever I approach the subject because, like you said, unorthodox perspective, that word selfish gets people thinking. Now, I'm part of the Rotary Club. So the motto is service above self. And it's that idea of think of others before necessarily looking after yourself. So there is a fine line with that, because like they say on an aeroplane, you put your gas mask on, your oxygen mask, before anyone else's, because if you're not there, you're not help to anyone. And it really comes down to that. If you get yourself unwell, or if you're not there, if you're in a position not to be able to help, then how can you help anyone? So it's doing the things that, like we say, build you up to be the best version of you.
Yeah, like for me, there was this this kind of other thing that I'm a part of, and they kind of use this term of like self-interest, and I think in a way like that. In a way, it describes in a way like what we're kind of talking about here a bit as well. Like there's a difference between somebody being selfish and actually somebody's self-interest in something, because yes, it's going to benefit them, but it's also going to benefit, let's just say, one's community or one's audience or one's family, or one's friends. Like just using the airplane example, it's very much in my self-interest if I put my oxygen mask on first, or my mask on first, so then I can survive, or have a greater chance of surviving, so then I can help other people in that situation, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's a huge difference between one's self-interest and then being selfish, but also like, we're human beings, right? We're programmed to survive, so at any level, I feel like there has to be some level of whatever you want to call it, selfishness, like self-interest, whatever it is, because that's just like, in my mind, like, from what I've kind of learned, that's how we survive, we're designed to do that.
Well, it's that prehistoric brain, isn't it? It's the fight or flight reflex. So when we were when we were cavemen or whatever evolution you believe in, then our worries of that day would have been, right, where do we find food? Where do we find shelter? Where do we find respect and safety in numbers in a tribe? And then, what are our predators? So they were the only concerns we have. Now we're in a society now where it's bred into us to always help other people. And by and large, we probably all know people that don't naturally do that. They don't naturally fall on that side of the coin. Things very much to do with them, and they may well have their own ways to help other people. But then you get people volunteering, involved in charities and things like that. And that fight or flight response will always be there. When it comes down to it, if our life is at risk, then we will always try and defend that. That's in our prehistoric brains. So that's always going to be there. But it's in a complicated society where everything's fully accessible. We've got internet, we've got information that's 24 hours a day. We can access that. At what point do we get, like that prehistoric man would have had hours to contemplate things, to learn where they sit in life and what they want from life? Where do we get that now? Because we have to put that in ourselves now. We don't naturally get breaks. We have to schedule in time for, self-development, or even just being quiet, or even relaxing, reading, things like that. We have to schedule it in. It's just a very different place.
You said something interesting there on that sense of safety in numbers. Back then, like when I take on from what you just say there, Matt, like I think a thought came into my mind. Like there was a documentary I was watching a while ago.
Oops.
Leeroy is gone. He was on his phone, so I don't know if he's got like a phone call or something, and then he's back. There we go.
What happened? I don't know.
It's like start.
Go on, Leeroy.
It's all right, man. So yeah, as I was saying, like there's this documentary of the indigenous people that I saw a while back, and what you just said was quite interesting when I was thinking back on the documentary. And I think we've all watched some sort of documentary on indigenous people, but the thought you mentioned there on like safety in numbers and being such a community as we see them now, some of them are so far removed from civilization. But when you look at their makeup of community, there is that sense, like your Rotary Club motto of like, you serve others before you serve yourself, right? And that generally is sort of like their mantra in terms of like their daily habits and daily things that they do, right? And then there comes a time, I think, when everybody sort of like has a time to just sit down, to just sort of like take in the day, whether it's around the fire, whether people are talking or anything like that. And I think for a large part of our society, like you said as well, Ma, is that civilization has given us the ability to do everything by ourselves. Like I think COVID has shown us something as well, that like you can pretty much live by yourself, as much as it's not ideal and it's not the best thing or the funnest thing you can do. Through the society we live in, you can live by yourself. Comparing that to people of an indigenous community, they probably wouldn't be able to survive by themselves in such a hostile environment. Hence why there's that big sense of like, we're doing this for everyone, but as much as I am here, I'm also taken care of as part of a group. Whereas we have the ability, like you said, now we can say, I can do things myself. I don't necessarily need others, but I can work with others to further myself. And then we've got other people who say, you know what, I've got enough, or I've given enough of myself. Let me give more to others who are in need. So, like you said, the complexity of society today gives us the opportunity to actually choose any path we want to walk, a selfish path or a selfless path. A hopeful path or a helpless path. Like when we compare that to such an indigenous community, they don't have that choice. It's almost like you walk into this lifestyle and you understand that through your efforts, we are all okay. And if I lack, then everybody's lucky, And there's now that sense where I think there is there's something I've also identified through those documentaries, that there's a very sense of knowledge of self to these people. As much as they are a part of a very big group or a community, they can individually understand that I am this person, you know. And you find that throughout their days, they probably have those pockets of reflection, pockets of like contemplation, pockets of like, you know, understanding that, yes, as much as I am doing everything for everyone, I also have this self amongst everyone. And there is a part where you now feel part of a whole being, because there's another aspect to these people. They also look at nature as they are also part of nature. We, on the other hand, we have detached ourselves from nature because of our technological advancement, and you know, we almost don't see the need for nature per se. I mean, you know, we're burning down trees, you know, we're building our civilization, but at what cost? You know, those that are of you know, global warming activity, they will come and say, you know, we're doing such and such, but because we are not face to face with the consequences of our actions, it's hard for us to see the selfish part of the civilization we live in, you know. I think,
Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say you hit a really good couple of points there, I think, and I just wanted to pick up on that, because when we look at the indigenous tribes, everyone, like you said, has a role within that tribe, and that tribe's only as strong as its weakest person. So, and everyone knows what their role and purpose within that tribe is. Because we have the facilities to be able to live, like you said, alone, we can do everything on our own. How is it we find our own purpose? Where do we get that from? We have to create that ourselves. We have to look inside and find out what our purpose is, because it doesn't come naturally. So then that leads to, you know, like feelings of hopelessness, not knowing what we're supposed to do, you know, feeling guilty for others, looking at others' stories and going, well, it could be worse. I could be having their life. I feel bad for having the good things that I've got. And you suddenly find that all these people that live to give, you know, empaths, people that are highly emotionally charged, can really find it difficult, because what is your purpose? And I think we've lost that, and I think life will be different. So if you look at small, close-knit communities, so we can look at other countries like India, families really live together. We also don't live near our own families normally. A lot of people don't. Anyway, we spread further and further away. You know, as roads come in, as cars come in, we can look at all these things. But when you look at close-knit communities, maybe in suburbs, city suburbs, you know, life will be very different there than it. Spoke to some people who are pretty wealthy, pretty successful in business. They've got big houses, but do you know what them estates, all them big houses, it's very lonely. Nobody speaks as much, because you almost pay for privacy, which means you're not part of that community. You're not part of a community naturally, which, you know, and it's just that ability to be whatever you want it to be is massive now. You can create your own path in life, but that natural sense, that tribal sense of community responsibility, strength, actually being able to apply your skills, you know, where do we find that from?
I think you touched on something that I found interesting when you mentioned that these indigenous people, tribes, like they almost find their purpose within this act of doing for others. Like, you know, everybody almost has a defined purpose. So you almost know why you're waking up every single day. You know, you almost don't question why you're doing the things you're doing, because you have a definitive purpose to what you're doing. And being part of, I don't know, a question came into my head where it's like, then is it having that community, would that help more people find purpose, like having that sense of like being able to be around others and expressing self, not from a conformity sort of like mindset. I've just come into this a new thought pattern of thinking that, you know what, I've realized that we almost, in the civilized world, we run on algorithmic patterns, you know, mindsets. Like every single, like we're talking about the path that we can create in our lives. you almost have to come up to a different algorithm to go down that path. And the more you hold on to that algorithm, the more you perceive life through that algorithm. For example, not in any way trying to stereotype or anything like that, but let's say I'm a Gothic person, right? My whole life will be surrounded by those that I know will reflect my values, right? So that algorithm, that mindset will be algorithmic to perceiving the world with the values that are in tune with who I am, right? And if I was to now meet somebody who's a Jehovah's Witness, right? They will come to me with their algorithmic mindset to try and change my mindset to fit their mold, because in their perception, I am not of the right algorithm. Are you following? Yeah. Now, when we have this inclination of wanting others to be part of our group, right? Like we almost have a sense of threat from anybody who's not of our same algorithmic mindset, because now it's going against how we see the world. And I feel like that in its sense has created in our world, the civilized side, it's created a sense of jealousy, envy, all those qualities that we do not necessarily like in life, but based on what we have, the ability to do things by yourself, right? You go out and say, okay, I can do everything by myself. I don't need anybody, right? And as we are going out, we want things to now work in the perception that we have. And the more we deny others, the more we want to impose our own on them so that they can come around to our perception. And I feel like it's not giving people the space to actually find self. As much as we now have this opportunity to create the world or to create a path that we feel aligned to with our heart and purpose, we are not giving ourselves, we're not giving each other that ability or the space now to not always try and impose our own algorithmic mindset on others, but give them the space to express and let them sort of be around others, like we're talking about in indigenous tribe. They are around each other, and you find that, okay, maybe you are good at such a skill, you excel in that skill. There's no need for me to try and tell you no, you need to go in this way. There's more sense of like you're saying, like there's self-awareness, because that comes from self-awareness to understand what you can do and be, and I think for a large part, I think one of the couple of episodes we started, Luke, were about life in the 20s and having gone through life from an early age. Largely you are being I would say coerced into not what you want to become, but what the world thinks you can be. And it's only when we come into our 20s, then we come to a point where we're like, no, I actually want to live a life like this. And then now it takes us some more years to unlearn what we have learned, to become what we may want to be in our 40s or, pushing onwards like that. So it's a question, I guess, like I was saying, like, do you think the ability to have that community sense would almost help someone to find their purpose quicker or better, or have a better definition of it, I guess? Yeah. Would a community sense of being help us define our purpose better?
Do you want to go first, Matt?
Yeah, sure. I think you're absolutely right. I think having that feeling of community and that environment can bring the best out of someone. And I think looking back to the tribe again, and when I said about the Rotary Club and the saying there is, if you're in a community, you can absolutely categorically before self, because somebody else is putting you before them. So you've automatically looking after each other. So there's less of a sense that you need to take the time to look after yourself, because you've all got each other's back. We've all seen the films like 300 and Gladiator. All them guys would be willing to die for a friend, because everybody is looking after everyone and their value is all one. they're all worth equal things to that, because they know that everyone is so valuable to that. But I also think there's another level. I think we've found there's another level of almost like strength and clarity in mind as well. And I think if you can be in a community or several, potentially it's quite difficult to be fully engrossed in. So if you can then see another community, remove yourself from the values of yours and try to look at another one without judgment, objectively, and actually understand, to allow other things in and other influences, then I think that's where we get some real development in terms of widened thinking, in terms of progress in some of the things that happen in society. I think the thing with community is you can end up pigeonholing yourself if you're not of the right open mindset. And although it's a strong place to be, it's where you normally end up with, we've all seen in politics, you've got one side and the other side. And actually, when you look at it, it's just two sides of human beings wanting the same thing, just in a different way. So I definitely think there's almost like another level, an upper echelon, I like that word, I had to fit that in somewhere, of thinking where you can actually be part of it, be a strong sense of community, and then take yourself away from it, and actually not necessarily be involved in it, not necessarily buy into it, but understand it. And that curiosity is at the end of the day led us to where we are today. But I'm not sure there's that many people that are able to do it nowadays, or it's not necessarily promoted as we grow up as kids. Parents, in whatever their mind, however they've grown up, they lead us to grow in a way, and like everyone is a bit more independent and look at what we actually want. But what I think we could do with is that little bit more of throughout school and the education system is actually that open thinking and that actually exploring different things without it just being out of a text, exploring why things happen, why people believe. Slightly controversial, without taking it slightly controversial. So I've been watching Man in the High Castle. Now, I don't know if any of you guys have seen that. It's essentially a program where it's essentially, there is a point to this. I'm not just going on about TV, but it's essentially a program that looks at America if the war had been won by the Germans and the Japanese. So it's set after that. But by the way that's written, you actually, as you start to understand some of the inner workings, these two forces which we are taught, and by all means there was a lot of atrocities and a lot of deaths, all these things that were evil, so they're the definition of evil to us, as Westerners. You start to understand a little bit about why things had to be, because they were fighting for a cause, and although it's quite hard to accept, if you can look at that from the other side and go, actually I can see that, I don't like it, but I can see it, and I can understand it. I think it just widens our thought patterns and processes.
You just reminded me of the book. I don't know if you've ever come across it. It's called Men's Search for Meaning. What was his name? It was by a psychotherapist who was also kept in a German camp. And based on his own experience. You found it?
Yeah, go on, sorry.
Yeah, like based on
I think I've got it. I think it was the last one I've just downloaded,
it was
Viktor Frankl, yeah.
That's it, yeah. It was an eye opener for me when I read that book. It's like exactly what you're saying. Like if you go through communities or through different groups of people in life, like, and you don't you almost immerse yourself to an extent that you cannot detach self from this community, or the way that you perceive, you cannot detach. It can come to a point where the only example I can think of is of people that I've seen some documentaries on people of the science church. It's called the scientific church, and they go into the church and they get so immersed, and based on the culture of that community, they get, so sort of like left from their families. They leave their families and they isolated. That's the word. They become isolated. That the only choice they have is to take in these principles and values and live by them. And based on the information they're given, that's all they know of life almost for a large amount of time. You know, and I think it can be very painful. I think when you know, like, that you probably hold a different set of values or a different set of perception, but because of the community you're in, like, you cannot see yourself beyond that. And the word that you use, that upper echelon, sort of like, you know, having the open mind to understand, but not to conform almost, you know, and lose self in that, you know, because that's when you become critical thinking with practical application, you know, of your principles, your livelihood. You know, it becomes a point where you are not subconsciously going into things, but you're consciously understanding how the other side lives without sort of like letting go of your own values and principles. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, kind of going back to your question, Leeroy, I think it actually just plays into what you guys were kind of discussing there in terms of, can a community help you find your purpose? I think it depends on the type of community, or on the community ultimately. Yeah, I think it depends on the community, really, because I actually lost my line of thought. Listen to you guys chat.
I think I see where you're going with it, because it's almost like show me your friends and I'll show you who you are. That's a saying.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and when we talk about like the community and we talk about a sense of purpose, I think another side to this complexity of society we live in is that, as much as you can now, like, find yourself in a community and try and find your own purpose, you can also find yourself in a community that's very against finding any purpose and driving you more away from your purpose than closer. You know,
because Leeroy, like, so I was going through a course recently, and the section on purpose, I don't want to mess this up, but it was basically around of like how our purpose is linked to our own internal values, like finding something meaningful to us to kind of serve, or to, you know, that we want to kind of live our purpose around, based on our own internal values, right? And so, like, you know, if we grow up in the community, but let's just say we don't necessarily agree with some of the things, because you mentioned it before of like, I forgot the actual phrase or the words you used. I think it was I can't remember what it was, but it's like, actually, you don't necessarily have to agree, or like, with the community or with the values, but like, I suppose like what we're doing here is like challenge it ultimately. You know, I've got the actual phrase that you used. So yeah, like, I think ultimately, like, our purpose is something that we want to serve, or is like meaningful to us based on our internal values. And so if you're growing up in a community, or you're a part of a community that also have those same values or that same meaning, then I think it can help you. But I think if you're growing up in the community, and I don't know, let's just say you're the, you know, I don't know, rebel of the group, right? And so you want to be there and kind of challenge the state, like kind of like what we're doing with the podcast, right? Like challenging conventional thinking, challenging the status quo. Like, that's going to be frowned upon, but you're serving a purpose far bigger than yourself, and you're serving a purpose based on your own internal values. So I think purpose for each of us is something meaningful to us. However, because kind of going back to the tribes point that we were talking about before, I still think there's some of that today. Like, obviously we're, I think, kind of like hardwired that way, but I think that's why sometimes we may get into meaningless jobs, or or just get into meaningless work, or just consistently do things that necessarily doesn't make us happy, but we do it to appease our parents, right? Or we do it to not look like the rebel in society, because if we step out of that, then we are kind of seen like the rebel, basically, right? But it's sometimes in stepping out that we can actually find our own internal values, and our own internal meaning and our own internal purpose. So yeah, that's kind of where I was going with it depends on the community.
I think I would say, like, to anyone who's listening and is thinking, how do you actually find your purpose? Like, I think one thing we have to remember as well, I think you just touched on there, is that the community, where you are, or the people that you find yourself around. Community, we mean people around, right? Around you, let me say. I think we also have to remember, like, it's a matrix that we're in, right? It's the matrix that we're in. Now, we do not necessarily know every aspect of the matrix, right? But based on our perception, I would say that there's an algorithm that we can all sort of follow, right? Go to school, get your uni, and just find a job and work up the ladder, retire, and then that's a pension for you. You know what I mean? That's something that we have accessible to us, right? It's fair and fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Many people go down that route. There's nothing wrong with that. And then it's almost like you almost, as much as you have something that you may value or you may actually yearn for from deep within, you are okay with it being on the side and focusing on your life and just having this good life until you come of age. And then I would say there's some of us, such as you and I, Luke and Matt, like, we have an inclination of putting something out there so that others may also be of a benefit, right? Based on what we're trying to do. We understand, yes, we're still in a matrix, that there is so many other algorithms we can run on, but there is this one path. That's why they say it's a narrow path when you're trying to go down a route where, when I go back to what Matt was saying, is that to actually find that time to contemplate, to actually reflect, and to just gain more self-awareness, you have to be very on job. You have to be like, okay, I am gonna do such and such and do this so that I can achieve this goal. Yes, I still have my own responsibilities. Let's say you've got a job, you've got a 9-to-5 job, you've got everything you want to do, but you have opened your mind up to an extent that you understand that you can almost work on this one project on the side while you earn your living with this one project on this side, right? And that in itself now gives us a sense where, when you now go up to somebody who may not be necessarily of the same mindset, to say, you know what, I want to find more of who I am and what I can do, and this value I feel within, I want to see it in manifestation. Somebody will look at you and say, but you don't need to do that. There's no need for you to do that. You can just live this life as simple as I am living this life. And I think where we now can clash is that we do not, like what Matt was saying, is that being able to see from the other side, but not thinking that you are in the wrong side because you're doing of your own, something that you feel like you're called to. There's that sense where sometimes we feel like, because others are doing such, we should do such. But when we believe in ourselves and look into ourselves, you realize that there's something that you want to do. I think, Luke, we've spoken about this long time. Like, from the very first minute, you thought, I want to do something. You have followed that thought process to this day. We are sitting here making a podcast called Unorthodox Perspective, right? And that thought process led you to where you are based on your will to just keep digging within yourself. When we now think of the community, like I'm saying now, like, that we have these different communities in this matrix that we live in, yes, but we have this personal will that we can choose, which path to lead. And it can also come across as selfish, like we said when we started. Like, oh, why are you doing that? Oh, you don't want to come and see us. Oh, we're your friends. Oh, you're being selfish these days with your time. Oh, why are you doing all this such and such? When we now look at that, like what you're saying, Luke, is that like your purpose, something that you really value from within. When you see yourself trying to walk towards that purpose, and the community you have around you is almost trying to pull you back from that purpose than to fund you into that purpose more, then you found yourself in a very clear definition of whether you're moving towards or away with the community that you surround yourself with. And I think that can be a very a good starting point, where you understand we live in a world that is complex in itself, but we don't have to have everybody come off a 9 to 5 and follow an entrepreneurial job, or everybody who's an entrepreneur.
But Leeroy, just on that,
yeah.
So sorry to interrupt, but I'll come back to you, and then we can go to Matt. But like, just quickly on that. So over the last 18 months, I think that I've grown in the sense that before I was very pro entrepreneurship, and I still am. I love entrepreneurship, right? But I've kind of realized that actually we're not all born to be like entrepreneurs, right? And actually the 9 to 5 is fine for some people. The key here is if our audience or whoever's listening is consciously deciding and consciously choosing to, let's just say, work or go down the path of 9 to 5. The challenge or the problem is that in terms of human consciousness as a whole, it's, in my mind, it's very low, because we get into these cycles and just kind of walk through life sleepwalking. People can go and work a 9 to 5 job. I have no problem with that if they consciously choose it. If they consciously know that actually I'm making this choice, I'm making this decision, I want to work this job, whatever it is, because because it's my purpose. The job that I'm doing is meaningful work, and I get paid at the end of the month, and I don't have all the other stress of running my own business, right? And so that's my thing, and that's my thinking now around people who kind of say to me, or just kind of look what I'm doing, be like, running a business isn't for me. I'm like, great. Are you consciously choosing to work that job? Are you consciously choosing to go down that career path? And if you're not, and you're doing it to appease social pressure or parents or whatever it is, then for me, we have a big problem. So I just wanted to share that, and just wanted to throw that in there. With everything that we're talking about, it's about consciousness as well. It's about actually people raising their own level of consciousness, and actually I'm going down this path because it's in alignment with my values and with my purpose. Sorry, Leeroy, I'll come back to you, and then we can go to that.
I think that's a very good point. I think a question I would have to you, from our viewers' perspective, I would like to think is that how can you put that across? If I was somebody of that unconscious lifestyle cycle, how can you, somebody who has come to know more, how can you put that across to me in a way that does not make me feel like it's almost like I'm doing something wrong? How can it come across as in a way of open your mind up a bit more and see life with a conscious approach? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So, hey, Stuart. So, Stuart's in the comments. Hi, Stuart. Thank you for joining us, man. Matt, I'll come to you on this one, and then I can come back to it. I'm curious to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, some people. So, I think when we look at values, I link a lot of my values to my gut feeling. And I think if someone's not highly aware of maybe what values are, what their values are, there's things that make us feel good, or there's things that we would naturally lean to. And I would say some of those are our values, things that we enjoy, things that we want to do. And then there'll be things that are against our values, so things that make us feel uncomfortable. So that whole of the mindset. So, but there's also people that will have values that don't include work. So work could be a 9-to-5 job. It could just be to bring in some money to pay the bills, to enable somebody to do something that they value or that they found their purpose. So we find there's a lot of people that.
But even in that, Matt, sorry, Matt. But even in that, like, if they're still choosing to work that job, for me, it's still bringing that level of consciousness to it. Like, they've still chosen to work that job, and there's still some level of fulfillment out of that. Because let's not be mistaken, right? Like, work is such a huge part of our life. Like, most of our waking life, we are going to work or we're doing some form of work, right? So, like, if we're not loving what we do, or if we don't even like what we do, and we're just kind of doing it and we don't have no kind of awareness or consciousness around, like, why am I doing what we're doing? Then for me, it's just my personal perspective. I'm like, well, what's the point, you know?
Friday, baby, yeah.
What's Friday? What's one of those? No, I think actually, and I think I went a little bit awry from what you actually asked. And if we are unconscious of that stuff, that is quite worrying. There's that autonomy. There's that just following, and it's following somebody else's influence. So what I would explain to somebody is, if you ever feel out of control, or we have feelings of nervousness and we have feelings of anxiety and stress and things, then actually looking at your life and being conscious and making more conscious decisions would be a good way to feel stronger and to get more from life. So then it may be that we could help people think about everything that they do and why they do it. And that'd be a good way to try and find your purpose. But yeah, I think if you were to ask somebody and I was to go, I don't know why I do what I do, I just do it. I think I think I'd be doubting the employers employing somebody that doesn't know why they want to do the job. But that's just me.
100%. and Leeroy, like, you made a good point there on, like, Friday, because then what happens is people do just live for the weekend, right? And they just live for Friday, and then, like, guys, I lived it, you know, like, as soon as Friday midday come, when I was at my 9-to-5, like, we used to finish at midday, I was so happy. But then the feeling of dread and anxiety would come Sunday morning, ready for Monday morning, you know, like, and so my Sundays would just be wasted, like, you know, wasted ultimately. So I would literally have, like, you know, let's just say in a month, I would have like 4, 5, probably about 7 days or something out of a month, or like 31 days where, like, I would be more happier than not because it's Friday from midday or it's Saturday, you know? And so that's, from my perspective, of kind of what I sometimes see happen within society ultimately. One other quick point, and this is kind of going way back to when we first started this conversation, Leeroy. I wrote it down, that when you were talking about communities and, like, other different communities, right? There's this kind of thing, I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It's called unconscious bias. And so basically it's when, I mean, Leeroy, you kind of pretty much summed it up in terms of, like, if I'm part of a community, then I'm more going to be biased to that community rather than be open to kind of seeing other people's perspectives, kind of thing, you know? Which again, if you're, like, even the first step of being aware of that, I think is starting to change that. Like, I would say that I have unconscious bias around wanting to, like, 9 times out of 10 be around people who are like-minded, like you guys and fellow entrepreneurs, because I think, why would I want to be around somebody who's, like, more negative, you know? And so, like, over the past, I don't know, year or so, I've tried to develop, like, more empathy to negative people and kind of, okay, why are they thinking negative, and actually support them through that process of to be more optimistic. So yeah, that was something way at the beginning. I wrote it down and just wanted to throw it in there.
I get what you're saying. I think you just mentioned something there on, like, we can come to a place where we can be so biased based on the group of people that we hang around most with, or, you know, we share same values and principles. And one thing, I think, something that has been a strength for me, being a person of thought, like deep thought, like, I found myself in so many different environments, so many different people, and one thing I've come to for a long time is that even when I'm around people that seem like maybe, let's say, unconscious, or they don't know much, or it seems like they're more negative than positive, I've come to this place where I'm very observant. I'm a present observer, right? And through observing, like, I myself, I may not necessarily speak with them or share any or take part in that negativity, let's say, but being present enables me to take in their presence without denying it. And that in itself opens up I like the word Matt used, an upper echelon of thought. Because how you now taking the experience you have with these people, where it should almost edify your position and your self-awareness, and understanding that this is part of humanity. We are all one. And some may not necessarily know as much as we do, some may have a 9 to 5, some may not. We all have these different paths, but that does not mean our paths are better than any one of the other person, right? So in having that, like what Matt is saying, like having that open mind, like it's I feel like there's a weight that people think like having an open mind is this different way of thinking or being. No, it's just not letting your own values and principles stop you from seeing things as they are. Does that make sense?
But that is very different mindset. But Leeroy, that's a completely different mindset to kind of what's, for most people. Matt, I just kind of, we've been going for an hour. I don't know if you have to go. We plan to stay on until 8, so another half an hour or so. Is that okay with you, or do you have to go? And
I'm going to have to go pretty soon, but
okay, cool.
That's all right.
Cool.
Yeah.
So that's fine. I was just a bit kind of conscious. Pretty much now with this new format, we do like Monday evening for about an hour and a half. So in terms of that, then sorry, Leeroy, I just kind of caught the time.
Yeah, that's okay.
Matt, so like, do you have any thoughts on like what Leeroy was talking about there, and do you have any final thoughts or words of inspiration before you have to dash that you want to kind of share with the audience? And
I think I love having these conversations because we can speak on a level that we understand, and I think there's a possibility that there'll be people listening to this that it almost doesn't make sense, or it is on another level, or it's just a little bit too much, or but I think if we were to ask anybody 2 questions to open up a conversation on whether things could change or being more conscious, it would be, are you doing what you want to do to get what you want? And you'll either find that someone's getting what they want, but they're not aware of what they're doing to get there, but they're still getting it. Or you'll find someone that's doing what they want, but they aren't getting where they want to be. Or there'll be people that, there'll be people that be both. But I think it's about want. And I just wanted to grab onto that. It's one of the simplest things I do before I go is, to-do lists. So to-do lists are great, for an organizational thing, just going off on a slight tangent. But when something sits on that to-do list for too long, it loses its value. Just like many things, if we do things, it becomes unconscious because we just do it, because it has no real value. So we don't look forward to doing it. We often don't think about doing it. We don't put any emotion on there. But on that list, if you make it a want-to-do list, then not only do you say, I'm making a conscious decision to do this action, but also you actually start to think about the little things such as cleaning up, tidying, doing the bed. Because if you think about that, you go, well, why is that doing what I want? I hate doing it. Do you like having a tidy room? Yeah, I like having a tidy room. Then you're doing it because you want to. And if we look at that word want, it can be really powerful in helping anybody think around some of these subjects and actually open up for discussion.
I love that, Matt. That's awesome, and that's a great way for you to leave. Before you do go, where can people find you online? if they want to connect with you and learn more about what you do?
Absolutely. So Instagram, I'm doing it for.me, which is coincidentally the same as the website address, which is www.imdoingitfor.me. Nice and simple. No .co.uk or anything like that. It's .me. So it's all about me, as in you, not me, because that would completely reverse our conversation.
It would.
But no,
it would.
No, it'd be great to speak again, guys. I've really enjoyed it tonight.
I really enjoyed
so
it,
thank
man.
you for having me on.
No
problem,
you for
man.
coming along, man. Thank you.
Yeah, much appreciated. When it gets turned into like the actual podcast, obviously we're live streaming now, I'll send you some stuff to share and everything. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, let's keep in touch.
Yes. Thank you, guys.
Take care.
See you later.
Yeah.
Awesome. Just the two of us left. Guys, do you have any questions? Have we got some viewers watching right now? If you have any questions on what we've been talking about, please do leave them in the comment section. Yeah, Matt had to run, but me and Leeroy are here for about 20 more minutes or so.
I'm probably gonna have to leave soon myself as well.
Okay, no problem, man. No problem. Cool. So like, yeah, do you want to finish what you were talking about, and then we can kind of wrap up?
Yeah, man. I mean, this subject is quite it's quite interesting, I think, for me anyway, because I've been somebody who's very like obdurant. That's this word means, like headstrong, like very unmovable on what I feel like this is what I can achieve, and I will achieve it. You know, I'm not very. It's not that I am
ambitious. So you're ambitious.
I am very ambitious, you know, and I think that was a strength for me anyway, in terms of like self-actualization and just self-awareness. Like being so ambitious, like I was very open-minded to understanding how can I achieve these ambitions. Do you know what I mean? So it really gave me the ability to look beyond any biases that I may hold, in order to learn something that will further my gain of self and, you know, self-worth. And I can say, like, it's like what we're talking about with Matt is that you want to almost have that conscious understanding of what you're doing. Like I've come to this new form of sort of like task noting, basically. Basically what I do is, okay, let's say I want to build a website, and this is from scratch, right? The top of my list is going to be building a website, right? And now every bullet point I link them, like it's almost like a thread, right? So every bullet point I will write down, okay, once I have selected the theme of my website, I'll write down, okay, the theme selected, right? Once I start putting things on the website, I'll write, I've put this down, the homepage. Once I've done the contact page, I've put this down. You know, I've created this, I've linked this, and I will take down these steps as I go along, as I find myself. It's sort of like little milestones I'm reaching, right? As I'm going along, and I'm taking note of it, because I find that it helps me now. One, when I'm doing the work and I come to that point where sometimes you get to a point you're like, I'm tired now, you know, let me just, you know, when I look at that little page, it reminds me of how far I've come, right? And that gives me a bit more motivation to keep going. And once let's say I've come to a point where I'm half done with the website, I'm like, okay, this is enough for today. You know, I'm quite satisfied with what I've done. Sometimes you can look back at a task that you want to do, like what Matt was saying, a to-do list, and the longer it is there, the more it becomes valueless, right? And I've realized that these little tasks that I've taken down and I've done, when I look at it tomorrow morning or whenever, when I continue this project, it gives me a picture of how far I've come. So this task that does not seem like a big thing that I'm trying to do, right? How does that come into purpose finding? Like, I find that a number of years ago, for my own self anyway, I just started doing this for self, like to become more conscious, like what Matt was saying, like to become more conscious of because sometimes we take the breakfast time for granted, you know, the little 15 minutes or 30 minutes, you know, or that little time you're just on your phone scrolling, like, and then it eats 45 minutes of your time. Like, we don't necessarily see those times. But when you write that down to say, okay, you've woken up, okay, fine, in the morning I've had breakfast with my partner XYZ, I've done this after breakfast, I've cleaned my plate, I've done this, I've done this for how long? I then wrote a column of why. What is the purpose, right? What has this enabled me to gain? What have I gained from this interaction, from this action, from this activity, from whatever it is that I may have done? But taking it down and being so honest with myself enabled me to have a clear understanding of my sort of like almost minute to minute activities and how I'm dealing with my own time, and how is that getting me closer to what I want to become, or the purpose that I know I want to be, right? And after a week looking at these pages, I can now look at how I can minimize time on that, probably do this then, you know, and I find that I can be able to now use the same 168 hours, but with a bit more direction, with a bit more intent and conscious understanding of how the purpose you are driving towards is getting closer than further. You know,
That's interesting. So it was just this morning. I was actually finishing this course, the same course that I mentioned before. So I was at the end, and around time. So there was this last section on time, and pretty much it was all about kind of how we kind of live in the world where like everything seems to be urgent, right? But there's a difference between what's urgent and what's important. And so when you were just talking around, like, you know, having breakfast with your family and like kind of all these different things, when we actually sit down and kind of reflect maybe and like look how we spent our time, there could be lots of urgent work in there, but is that urgent work still important? You know, like if that makes sense, like, you know, there could be lots of work that's urgent, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's important. And I think linking this all back up, like having these types of conversations, and even a few weeks ago, I was working with a client. Well, I did it myself, and then I was working with a client around like the 160 hours in a week, because the person I was working with was like, it was actually around content creation, right? And he was saying like, oh, I don't have enough time to create content. And so I was like, okay, then we're breaking this down. You know, we're breaking your week down. We're breaking 160 hours down. And so it kind of worked out that he had probably about 5 hours or something a week. I can't actually remember the number, where that was actually unaccounted for. And you know, we were very conservative with his time. We were very like, we even put in like we call it buffer time. Like, you know, if you're just kind of walking to the toilet, like, you know, like, you know, we went super kind of super narrow. Yeah, it's super micro, super narrow. And he still had like about 5 hours a week left, where just like unaccounted for. You know, I was like, okay, so you have 5 hours a week to create content, go and do that, you know. And so linking all this back up, it's just kind of like having these types of conversations, doing kind of practices like 168 hours kind of whatever you want to call it, just like reflection and everything, for me, raises human consciousness, or raises like people's consciousness, raises human, like if you're doing that, raises human consciousness as a whole, because now you're ultimately aware, and once you're aware, then you can start to kind of change it. So like that's something else that I just that I wanted to kind of share, based on what you was talking about with things in our lives that are so urgent, but are they really important? And if we really start to kind of think about that and reflect over our time and how we're spending those 160 hours, we can bring more consciousness to that, and then start to change that depending on our goals, right? Depending on our core purpose and what we're moving towards ultimately.
No, you're right, man. No, you're right. It's interesting, you know, this purpose finding life, because you have to be very creative with yourself. You have to be very patient as well with yourself. Be a person of perseverance. You know, and see what you know you can become in your mind's eye before you can see it any form of manifestation in the physical realm. Because the more you break yourself down, the more you can build up, if that makes sense. You know, the more you break yourself, the more you can see of yourself and the more you can make of yourself. You know, and it's important to not fear that process, because I think the one thing that I quickly jumped over when I began this entrepreneurial journey was this big wall in front of me. You know, like when I thought of the decision to say, okay, let me go down this path and do things myself and actually make something of myself, it just seemed like this big wall in front of me. You know, and this big wall in front of me became something I knew to myself, like, I'm gonna find either a way through, a way around, or a way under. Somewhere, somehow, I'm gonna find a way through and see the other side. And without any knowledge of what the other side held, I'd never met you, Luke, before. I had never met half the people I've met or done half the things I've done. But there's a daunting feeling at that first moment of realization that you want to go down this path, or there's something within you, this little spark that has just come alive, and you want to fan it. And the more you fan it, the more you find of yourself. And I guess that is where the breaking and, you know, making yourself, like, it's don't be scared to break the mold that you have come to see yourself as, because only then can you become that which you know you want to be. I will end it at that today.
Awesome, man. I love that. Awesome. Well, Leeroy, thank you so much for today. It's been an awesome conversation. I'm so happy to be back doing this and looking forward to the next weeks and months in front of us. Guys, if you're listening on the podcast or watching live on YouTube and across social, do get in touch or leave a comment below with what topics that you would find most valuable moving forward. We've got some guests to bring on as well. And so the kind of the new format every Monday, roughly about 6:30 to around this sort of time, 8 p.m. Just some awesome conversations come in. Anything that you want us to kind of take a deep dive on, do get in touch, leave a comment, let us know. And we will definitely kind of share our unconventional and unorthodox perspectives around that. Leeroy, do you have any final words?
No, just stay blessed, everyone, and take care. And say hi to someone out there.
Yeah, say hi to someone. I love that. So, guys, we will leave you with our outro. Go and have a great week, kick some ass, and we'll see you real soon. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Unorthodox Perspectives.
If you liked today's episode on the show, please subscribe and leave a comment below.
All relevant links for today's episode of the podcast can be found in the description, so please check them out.
And we will be back next week with another episode. Until then, have an awesome week.